Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another album of the week. This is episode number 170, and today's episode is focused on the classic fourth album from San Francisco-based hard rock band Y&T, which is basically short for Yesterday and Today. So, released back in sometime in August of 1982 through, of course, A&M Records. Already, since we're in pretty much the beginning of August, that means this album is already reaching its 40th anniversary, so 40 years to... pretty much it is considered a classic record for these guys. And so, I guess without further ado, I'm definitely going to get into Black Tiger from Y&T, and I'm also going to get into at least some bullet point history for Y&T. And so, let's definitely get into it, folks. Let's all get into it. Okay, so since you probably at least do know a little bit of the early history around Y&T, short for Yesterday and Today, but I'm definitely, for this video, since I really haven't covered any sort of Y&T record on this channel, I have to kind of go into some sort of little history about it. Goddamn motorcycles. And shit, because I have the window open right now. Back to this, though. Since I've never really covered any of their albums on this channel, this is the first time, so I have to kind of run into a little bit of backstory for these guys, and run through the little history surrounding the formation of Y&T and so on it. But it's definitely going to be more bullet points in a way. It's not going to be the entire history of Y&T, just running through the early formation of Y&T. So let me definitely get into that before I really go straight into the meat of the matter, that being the album of the hour. Let me definitely run through this. So, this is pretty much how the story goes. Leonard Hayes, Bob Gardner, and Wayne Stitzer had an unnamed band in Oakland, California that jammed only cover tunes. Dave Meniketti joined as guitar player in 1972. However, soon after, the band received a call for their first gig, but they needed a name. According to Meniketti and Hayes, Leonard Hayes chose the name of the album that was playing on his turntable at that moment, which of course was the Yesterday and Today studio album from the Beatles. The first lineup, which only played cover songs, the first fucking lineup, consisted of Leonard Hayes on drums, Wayne Stitzer on piano, and Bob Gardner on bass, and of course Dave Meniketti on lead vocals and lead guitar. However, Wayne Stitzer quit the group and Bob Gardner switched to bass. Switched from bass to rhythm guitar on and piano. However, also coming into the fold was Phil Kennemore. Was brought in to play bass. In 1973, Bob Gardner left the group and was replaced by Joey Alves in January of 1974. It was from here on out that we would pretty much get the definitive, original, classic lineup for Yesterday and Today / Y&T. So this is pretty much the beginning of the lineup, and that's where we ended up leading into their first record deal with London Records, and would lead into their very first studio record in 1976, which was self-titled. And then eventually in 1978, with their second record, Struck Down. However, while finishing the album Struck Down, London Records decided that they wanted to disclose they disclosed that they were getting rid of all of their rock artists. And apparently, according to Meniketti, who had commented on this, basically said that this essentially meant that Struck Down would go nowhere. And in a way, he kind of was somewhat right, because of since London Records was, because of them getting rid of all the rock artists, that meant they weren't going to give a lot of promotion to all those records. Now, was under their belt that was released by hard rock bands in 78, they weren't going to give them any promotion. That meant everyone was going to tank sales-wise and financially, and it was obviously a really bad decision, and it really hurt some of those bands. But again, this only ended up being learning lessons for Y&T, and it just made them, I guess, more hungrier to really kind of move forward. And so the band continued to tour extensively, building up to headliners with, building up, whatever. Again, they opened for bands such as Wild Cherry, AC/DC, and Kiss. However, as Mennikini has said in numerous radio, television, and magazine interviews over the past 4 decades, a new record deal, which took forever to secure, in 1980 with A&M Records, who was best known for having bands under their belt like Nazareth and Styx, and of course the Tubes, just to name a few there. And so this prompted the band to shorten their name to simply Y&T, because it was all at the request of A&M, who wanted them to shorten their name. And as influenced by their encores, where fans would chant Y&T, Y&T, and Y&T, that's pretty much where the overall idea to basically came. Because I guess they just thought, A&M, I guess, had the Vince McMahon mindset of when it came to names, is that shorter the better, you know. But I think this actually worked in the band's favor. So, obviously leading to Earthshaker in 1981, which obviously was not a mainstream success, it still garnered at least a good amount of notoriety for the guys, and that's where it ended up them being featured in magazines such as probably like Sounds and Kerrang and so on, where they were getting a lot of album reviews, and it actually, more worldwide, it gave them a much better notoriety. So it worked. So that pretty much leads us to 1982 with their 4th full-length album, Black Tiger. So here we go. The recording sessions for this album, obviously, it's not really quite stated when they took place, but it had to have been maybe sometime in early of 1982, and it all took place at the Ridge Farm in Dorking, County of Surrey, England, which was this is where they brought in producer Max Norman to do the record. And again, Max Norman already had some classic records under his belt, you know, working with Ozzy Osbourne for the Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman records. So he already had some notoriety under him, and that was just 2 years prior to this record. And of course, since then, Max Norman would go on to doing a lot of other great wonders for other sort of artists. I mean, Megadeth being one other band as well. But this all ended up becoming the recording sessions for Black Tiger, and so this is also the first time with the artwork that we saw the classic Y&T logo make its debut. So whenever the recording sessions finished, and whenever they went into the mastering, and of course the great artwork for the album, obviously sometime in August, we then finally see Black Tiger. So that pretty much finally leads us into the album itself. So let's just get into the track listing for the record, since we obviously have at least, technically it's tracked at 9 songs, but that's only because of you have at least a short little intro, which is a 42-second intro, which is titled From the Moon. But really, we get actually 8 full songs on the album. So again, 9 tracks, and all clocked in at the length of 38 minutes and 15 seconds. So again, these 9 tracks are, again, the aforementioned instrumental, that is From the Moon, then of course into the real song of the album, that being Open Fire, then into Don't Want to Lose, Hell or High Water, Forever, and of course the title track, Barroom Boogie, My Way or the Highway, then finally anyway, Winds of Change. So again, there's all your 9 tracks. Huh. So where do I begin with Black Tiger here? Where do I really begin? Well, I guess we can just go all the way back to how I discovered Y&T. And how I discovered these guys was when I was on YouTube searching for anything that was at least 80s rock or Dio related. And somehow I stumbled upon a video for a track called Stars from a project called Hearing Aid, which was actually Dio's sort of a charity thing in a way. It was a charity a project, and he got all of the sort of what was the most popular hard rock and heavy metal names in the business to be on the record. And one of the names that he got for that record was Dave Meniketti, who provided his vocals to the track. And so that's how I found out about them, and I'm like, huh. So I decided to go on to Wikipedia and pretty much searched up Y&T, and that's where I ended up stumbling upon their discography. And really the one album that popped out at me from the beginning was the album Black Tiger, and it was just because of its artwork and the logo. And I'm like, well, this looks really cool. And what's crazy to me that I wasn't that earlier aware of Y&T to begin with, and it blows my mind because I have, of course, a copy of Flick of the Switch by AC/DC, that being the remaster. In the booklet, it does feature the flyer for the Monsters of Rock 1984 show, which also, again, Y&T's name is on there, but it's so small that you kind of have to have almost like a magnifying glass to actually to really look at some of the band names on that flyer. Even though you can nowadays I can kind of point out which band name, which one is, but at the time it was a little bit difficult. But again, I was able to kind of overlook Y&T really early on, but in a way I kind of recognized the logo by just, again, when you're little, you're not really that much thinking about, oh, it's a different band. Oh, what is this? Again, I was young and I wasn't very much really that smart to stuff. So eventually, that's how I discovered Y&T, was because of the Stars track by the Dio's Hearing Aid project. But it took me a few years to actually listen to anything from Y&T, and I think I might have looked up a track from them on YouTube, but I could never really remember anything. But it's just the artwork that was the thing that popped out at me really early on. And again, all I was reminded of was those classic 80s Judas Priest covers, for like Screaming for Vengeance and Defenders of the Faith. I was just kind of reminded of that sort of style. And since this was released in the same year as Screaming for Vengeance, it's just it just fits along those. It just blends together. But eventually, sometime in 2009, I ended up really looking into listening to more stuff from these guys. Since I was just over years, I'd be remembering and reminding myself, there's that one band called Y&T. Maybe you should check them out. And so eventually I did, and I went into checking out songs off of like Earthshaker and Black Tiger, and of course even going as far back into when they were Yesterday and Today, when it was the full name. And I think one of the first songs I really checked out, for one, it was Dreams of Egypt off of Struck Down, and of course Knock You Out off of Earthshaker. But off of Black Tiger, I think it could have been Open Fire. That was the one that I really got into early on. But really, that was just the beginning, and I just really dug what I was hearing for years, and it's like, this is so great. So by sometime in the really beginning of the 2010s, I decided to cheat. Yes, I did the no-no. And I went and downloaded a copy of Black Tiger so I can actually listen to it. And I will be honest with you, when I first heard the album, it opens up with one badass song in Open Fire. What a hard hitter this song is. It's an absolute blast to listen to. And this is definitely what I was like, yeah, this is kind of already kind of living up to the album cover. But then it goes into like Don't Want to Lose, and it's like, okay, it's a little more melodic, a little more, slightly more lighter. It's not nearly as hard or as heavy as the previous track. Then again, we get into like Hell or High Water, and it's like, okay, not nearly as melodic as the other one. It's got more of a kind of a more of a groove to it, kind of like a very sleazy kind of groove. Because now I kind of go back and I'm kind of reminded of something that more similar to something of like Dangerous Toys. So. Then again, that's another album that Max Norman produced as well, and I just get that same kind of feeling. It's like this is a little like late '80s sounding in a way, not like something from like 1982. So it just seemed kind of weird. It's not screaming kind of early sort of '80s heavy metal in the way of like Judas Priest. You know, the way that I kind of got from like Open Fire is just kind of like, well, this is already starting to sound like late '80s period LA sound. But then we get into Forever, and this one, it took me years to really appreciate the track, but now of course, I love this track, because this right here, now we're kind of back on track here. It's like I kind of begin the same way, for the stuff for like From the Moon. It's like that same track there. But it's now more extended, and we actually get more of a galloping kind of metal track here. And it's like already we get something that might be more similar to like Michael Schenker Group and UFO and Scorpions, a little more European sounding, and I love it. And this is a great sort of track, and probably the second best song on the album, probably one of the absolute best songs on the album. Like, this is really a straight up. This is the good kind of melodic metal. This is definitely more, again, it just has a galloping pace to it. Again, it gives it that sort of European new wave or British heavy metal feel going on. And there's a lot of great leads on here, a lot of great sort of riffs on here. Just a really cool fucking track from beginning to end, and I love it. Again, and really showcases a lot of Dave Meniketti's guitar playing. I mean, he already was a shredder from the beginning of the 1970s, with, the beginning of his career in the 70s with these debut album. And especially in the Struck Down, there's a lot of great friggin' playing on those first two records. But this one is like, you can tell, he's gotten even more tighter. Yeah, I would definitely put him on the same caliber as like a Michael Schenker. Just really sort of nice and really edged out, real more, just a lot more focus, and everything just seems to be more played perfectly. Because again, that was like Michael Schenker's kind of playing, is like every note has to almost be as perfect as the previous note. Everything's got to be more played perfectly. It's like very neoclassical almost. So it's like it's got to be perfect, and that's the kind of feel that I get from his playing on this track. And there's a lot of great emotion being flown through this entire track here. It's just what a great number. Then of course we get into which would be beginning of the second half, because Forever ends the first half of the album. And so now we get to the title track, which opens up the second half of the album. And again, this one pretty much on the same sort of caliber as like Open Fire in a way. It's more back to being a straight up energetic rocker, where it's a real straight up smoking guitar riffs. Again, not nearly as epic sounding as Forever, but it still is great and fun. And it's just the way that I was expecting most of the record to really sound like. And again, it's another good track. Probably, again, the third best song on the album. Not nearly as epic as Forever, but it still is a good, solid, hard rocker in the way that songs like Open Fire was like. And this is already, it's like, okay, we're back on track here. Then we get into Barroom Boogie, and this is where things get a little bit kind of silly in a way. A little bit more humor. Not too far off from some of the lyrical ideas you kind of got on, like, let's say, the first two albums, which they always kind of got, even onto Earthshaker, there was a little bit of those kind of silly kind of lyrical themes. But musically, it's more of a tip. I mean, it's kind of typical of the title anyways. I mean, it's definitely more of a bar kind of pub or whatever, even though they're Americans. It's that kind of straight up bar stage hard rocking kind of song that's not too far off, let's say, like Van Halen, but it kind of pushes towards that. Again, it's a bit of a slight kind of a little herky-jerky kind of bluesy rocker, but it's still a fun song, and these days I've come to kind of appreciate the song more and more, but it's definitely not nearly as strong, let's say, like the songs we had gotten already with like the title track, Forever and Open Fire. Still not nearly as strong there, but still is a fun rocker in its own way. My Way or the Highway. This one, again, we're already back on to the same way we kind of were with like Hell or High Water. But it's not nearly as kind of groovy, but it kind of has that. It's still a fun rocker, and I now appreciate this song, but at the time when I first heard this record, I don't know, it was just kind of weird. It's like it kind of moves around a bit in terms of its consistency. It kind of moves around, almost a little bit inconsistent in a way, where it's like we're getting some really good hard rockers and heavier stuff with like Open Fire and Forever, and then the title track, and then it's like now we're kind of getting back to the way it was with the first half of the album, with Hell or High Water in a way. It's like a little similar there, but it's not too bad. I actually don't mind the track. Finally, though, we end the album with Winds of Change, and this one is probably the sole ballad of it. I mean, this one, it's not nearly as more epic as like Forever, but it kind of pushes towards that. This one definitely has more of that Scorpions and Michael Schenker group kind of songwriting to it, and I actually do think it's a really good track. It's definitely in the Scorpions camp, because I mean, what was it? When the Smoke Clears or something, I think it was called, off of Blackout. And again, it's a little similar, but it's a little bit more metallic, though. It's a lot more electric guitar based, but it's a really fine power ballad, and I think it's actually a good track. And for years, I had to really warm up to it, but now I've actually really enjoyed a lot of this song. Same thing, I've come to actually appreciate songs like Don't Want to Lose, because of after year, let's say, I'm actually reminded of was it You Burnin' Me off of Born in America by Riot. It's a little similar effect, where it kind of has, it's really playing around with more, I guess, again, it's more commercial kind of leanings with some of this record. Again, being produced by Max Norman, he does kind of give the band a much more cleaner sound, even though even the guitar tune and stuff is still heavy, it's still ripping, it's still got a nice, very hot, scorching atmosphere to it. It's got a nice sound, but it's definitely, compared to some of the earlier ones, this is probably the most cleanly produced album, and a lot more sharper produced, again, because of Max Norman and his production style. But he did kind of give the band some more commercial feels to it than, let's say, on the previous album, Earthshaker, which was a much more raw sounding record, but still kind of had those leanings, but they already kind of had them from the beginning with this set. It was a lot more edged out, more consistent, more coherent in a way. Like they actually kind of knew what they were doing, a little more focused. This one, you can tell they're kind of focused in a way, but you can tell that they're kind of playing around with certain different pacings. These days, I now appreciate the album more because of the fact that it kind of pushes around or plays around with more different pacings and more different variants and the songs in a way. It actually does. It's like when we're here, I mean, we get the scorching rockers like Open Fire, Black Tiger, and Forever, but we also, I mean, Forever is actually more of an epic kind of rocker, but it's a good track. But you get at least some stuff that might be more melodic that you'd expect to probably hear on, let's say, the radio in 1982, like Don't Want to Lose. Then, of course, Hell or High Water and My Way or the Highway are like the more sing-along kind of songs. And they got their distinctive groove to them, their own pacing in a way that kind of separates the songs a bit. So we actually at least get some slight variety in the song structuring on the record. And I think it does kind of give the album more of a slightly more interesting point to it. And at first, I thought it was weird, but now I actually somewhat enjoy some of these songs. Again, though, I don't know if I'll say like Hell or High Water, or let's say in a way kind of Barroom Boogie are my favorite songs, but I enjoy them. I probably enjoy Barroom Boogie more than, let's say, like Hell or High Water. But at the same time, I do kind of see how this might have been a little bit influential on a lot of the LA scene, especially with bands like Dangerous Toys and Guns N' Roses and so on. Like that, they're like Y&T were playing around with these structurings before those bands ever kind of did, or like Cinderella or whatever. Like they're kind of were playing around that really early on. So in a way, Y&T were kind of ahead of the pack here. If this album had been released a little later in the 80s, let's say like 1986, it might have gotten a little bit more mainstream recognition because it's actually playing around with those kind of styles in a way. But I think the fact that it's only a little bit more micromanaged, I think actually kind of makes the album work in my way, in my opinion, because it actually just it gives it its own personality. It gives it its own its own feel. It doesn't sound exactly the same as the previous record. It kind of expands a little bit, but plays around with some of the stuff, especially with the liberties that they had. And obviously, Max Norman was the guy that was obviously was one that was gearing the ship. He was the pilot here. The ship commander in a way. It's like he was the one that was really making things to go a little more forward and be more smoother. And so I think if anything what we got here was a fine solid record. So I really enjoy Black Tiger from beginning to end. I really do enjoy it. However, it seems like there is at least some certain individuals that don't really enjoy this record as much. I'm not going to name any names, but it's someone that was from AllMusic who made up making a lot of bold claims, though, when it came to some of this record. I mean, okay, it's one thing if you don't care for the record, but the one thing I have to point out and I want to bring up, because it's been on my mind for the entire time when I really got back into listening to this record. I mean, I've got the most recent Japanese CD reissue of the album, again, from Universal. That's part of the more, I guess their cheapy series in a way. That's the more domestically released series that you can even find at, let's say, Rasputin here in the US. Again, the more noteworthy Japanese releases. Oh, but again, since receiving that, every time I go back to this Wikipedia page, I think there's a really bold and really stupid claim that gets made on here, and it's that the person that did this review for Black Tiger on AllMusic ended up making the claim that producer Max Norman obviously is clueless about hard rock music, and that is a really, really bold claim to even say. That is bold. I mean, I already wasn't the previous episode, which was focused on The Crimson Idol by Wasp. I brought up how Canadian guy Martin Popoff stated that album that kind of hurts the concept album idea, like something like Operation Mindcrime. Like it hurts that kind of idea, which I thought was a really bold claim and a little bit, again, a stupid bold claim in a way. But this one, I think, kind of takes the cake for being probably some really bad, bold claims. Again, Max Norman, claiming that Max Norman is clueless about hard rock, when it's like, that's funny because of he's obviously what was a part of 4 of the most highly sold records and the most highly acclaimed records in rock and metal. That being, of course, the first 3 albums from Ozzy Osbourne, because both Blizzard of Oz, Diver Man, and Bark at the Moon were definitely highly sold records. And some of them are very much highly claimed. And of course, to now mention Rust in Peace and Countdown to Extinction from Megadeth. And those were, especially Rust in Peace, that's like the most highly acclaimed Megadeth record. And Max Norman was the one that produced it. And so for this idiot here to actually make the claim that he is clueless about rock and metal, that right there is the dumbest claim ever. Just because of you don't care for the Black Tiger record from Y&T doesn't mean you have to start making some stupid claims that Max Norman was clueless when he has been some of the most successful records in the genre. And some that were considered the most highly acclaimed, especially by Rolling Stone of all of them. So that's that shows how highly smart you are to the music there, you dumb fuck. Okay, so I just needed to kind of get that little rant out of the way. Yes, yes, I did use that. I did call him a dumb fuck. So I have no regrets over that. So there we go. So that's it. That pretty much leaves me with Black Tiger from Y&T. Again, I do consider this a classic record from Y&T, and it took me just, I would say, an even longer time to really appreciate this record, but to the point to where I think now I do consider this one of my favorite albums from these guys, though I think my absolute personal favorite from is actually the record that comes after Black Tiger, that being Mean Streak, but I'd say these two almost a little bit hand in hand. I think, though, that Mean Streak's a little bit more consistent in terms of what it's wanting to do. And, of course, that album was produced by the late Chris Sangarides, great legendary producer as well. Did some great stuff for Anvil and Judas Priest, for example, and Tigers of Pantang. But Black Tigers, I think, is a really good album in its own right, too, and a really fun record from beginning to end. So I'm going to end things there. So, obviously, we know about what ends up being the history for Y&T. Again, lineup changes, and of course, sadly, most of the members obviously have passed away since obviously these classic records. Leonard Hayes, Phil Kennemore, and Joey Alves. Again, rest in peace to all three of them, with Dave Meniketti being at least the lone one of them. And I hope he stays the lone one of them. And a lot of the health scares with him right now are really scary, and because he's now had to postpone a lot of the Y&T shows because of his health issues, and I hope everything's going on good there. I hope he's able to really kind of fight through whatever he's going through. I hope he's able to push through. So all my prayers and everything goes out to him and everything, and hope that they're able to kind of go on steadily and keep touring and keep giving everybody good shows and so on. So there we go. So again, if you have any sort of thoughts about Black Tiger, especially for those who have been around when this album was released, or maybe those that have listened to the record, again, if you have anything positive or negative, you can leave those comments in the comments section below. But if you're not that familiar with Black Tiger and you're kind of curious about them, this is definitely not a bad record to check out. But if you want to really check out, and especially if you like more heavier kind of sound or more just a little more straightforward, I would say you probably should give Mean Streak a listen first. But this album is still fun in its own right, and it still has some good songs, especially Forever for being one of them. What a freaking great track that is. So if you're not so sure whether or not you would like Black Tiger, I say check out the songs like Open Fire, Forever, and of course the title track and Winds of Change. Those are probably my four I will give you at least recommending. I'll recommend those songs to you. So there we go. I hope all of you enjoyed. This is Heavy Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.